One day, nobody dies. Next day, nobody dies. And the next, and the next, and the next. Torchwood Miracle Day. I felt with the start of 2020, one of the first things I want to do is finally finish off at least my first run through of Torchwood. And I'd heard a lot of things about Miracle Day. Now, mostly what I'd heard is that most people feel Torchwood Miracle Day didn't need to exist. That they felt that Torchwood Children of Earth wrapped up everything nicely, and that it was a logical stopping point for the series. Everything was strapped up, we didn't really need it. However, shortly after this, a new production company picked up production of Torchwood, that being Starz, and while it was still debuted on the BBC, it was Starz making it and trying to introduce it to an American audience. Now, also, there was a rumour going around for a while that John Barrowman was actually set to appear in the Doctor Who Series 6 episode A Good Man Goes to War, and that he would be beheaded by the Headless Monks, and that would ultimately lead to him becoming the face of Bow. But sadly, at the time, John Barrowman was busy filming Miracle Day. So, we got this instead. So, now, as I said, I had a lot of people who felt that this particular series didn't need to exist, but then I've also heard from others that after the kind of dour nature of Children of Earth, they actually enjoyed Miracle Day and they actually consider it one of the best. I think I'm personally in the former category and thinking it didn't really need to exist, but I'm also glad it does exist, and I do feel it did do some good stuff, especially towards the end. Now, the only people who really remained from the previous series, with most of the Torchwood team dead, the only ones that really remained were John Barrowman as Captain Jack Harkness, Eve Miles as Gwen Cooper, her husband, Rhys Williams, played by Kai Owen, and her friend Andy Davidson, played by Tom Price. The basic story of this particular series is that one day everyone wakes up to find that they can't die. And Gwen and Rhys have seemingly left their life at Torchwood behind and have settled down in a small cottage in Wales. However, they're called back to Cardiff when her father has a heart attack. In fact, he seemingly has two in very short succession, but he's still alive. And then the whole world seems to discover that nobody can die. Nobody knows why they can't die, but you can still get sick, you can still make living painful, but you can't actually die. Death is seemingly an impossibility. And that brings up a lot of new problems, because for those of you who don't know the show or don't really care about the show, you might be thinking, oh great, nobody can die, that's a good thing, right? Well, not exactly. People can still get sick, people can still be in pain, but they can't die, meaning hospitals can't really keep up. I mean, they have a load of people who should be dead, kind of taking up beds, taking up space in the hospital from people who might really need it. I mean, and using up everything, using up resources. Because that's the thing. Even if nobody dies on the planet, people are still being born, and the population is still growing. And with a growing population, we'd run out of natural resources far too quickly. We'd run out of them in about 3 months. Also, there's more ethical implications that Miracle Day sets into motion. For example, one of the characters is of this particular series, played by Bill Pullman, is a man named Oswald Danes. Oswald Danes, well, I won't reveal what he did, just here for YouTube's sake, but he did some very bad things before Miracle Day, and he was sentenced to the death sentence. He was given the chemicals. He should be dead. But then, because of Miracle Day, he doesn't die. But then his lawyers and he kind of argue that, well, I can't be put back in jail because I served the death sentence. I served my time. It wasn't my fault I lived. I served my sentence, therefore I can be let out of jail. So, yeah, I mean, while the main characters are in there, we've also got two new additions, because Well, with most of the rest of the Torchwood team dead, needed some new people. They introduced new characters named Rex Matheson and Esther Drummond, played by Mekhi Phifer and Alexa Havins. They're both kind of CIA agents who end up kind of looking into Torchwood and then kind of end up teaming up with them in order to try and figure out what exactly has happened and how they put it right. And they do have some very good stuff in there. I mean, Mekhi Phifer's character Rex Matheson, he throughout the entire time he said that he should be dead, but then he kind of keeps on going. But the series also looked at other way, other kind of implications of this particular scenario, and the kind of governments of the world eventually decide that life is categorized into three categories. Category 3, you're living, you're breathing, you're fine, you're still conscious, you're everything, you're good to go, like we are today. Category 2, you've sustained quite a serious injury, and under normal circumstances you should be dead, but given enough time and the right resources, they could stabilize you, so you're category 2. And then there's category 1, i.e., people who, while they're still alive, technically, they have no brain functions. They're not aware of what's around them, and they're ultimately going to be disposed of. And in this case, disposed of means taken to a rather large set of ovens and essentially incinerated, as that's now the only way that people can really die. But why is everyone suddenly living forever? That's kind of revealed quite late on. I believe it's like episode 6 or 7 or something, and it relates to a series of events involving Jack that went down in the 1920s and 30s. And there's also a company that wishes to capitalize on this deal that went down called FICOR. And while I have mentioned most of the other characters, there's also a character played by Lauren Ambrose called Jilly Kissinger. And while they advertise that Bill Pullman's character of Oswald Danes is a character that you love to hate, for me, by the end of it, that role was Jilly Kissinger. Just, I could feel she wasn't necessarily evil, but she was capitalizing on everything, and she just grew to be a character that I despised, but then I relished every opportunity she was on screen. You've also got other kind of minor characters in there played by minor actors that I frankly would love to see in the Hooniverse, and those are played by Wayne Knight and Teddy Sears. Wayne Knight kind of being one of the big shots of the CIA, and you can gather he's trying to do the right thing, but it doesn't always translate that well. And then you've also got Teddy Sears as a person who's working for FICOR, who some of you might remember Teddy Sears from season 2 of The Flash, and I just feel like once again, he doesn't necessarily do anything evil. He doesn't necessarily even do anything, but just you can feel he's got a rather sinister edge to him. Now, I will admit there are some things about this series that I'm not entirely convinced by. For example, compared to all the other series that didn't have this, I don't know whether it was in the original broadcast of this series, but you had at the start of each one John Barrowman and Russell T Davies, the head writer, kind of pop up in a small behind the scenes thing explaining what happened in each individual episode. And they didn't do that for any of the previous series, and I just began to wonder a bit at the start if they were having to explain exactly the purpose of this episode or the purpose of this series, didn't exactly fill me with the greatest confidence. But it certainly had some good stuff, especially towards the end. I mean, when everything eventually comes together and it's revealed how everything is being done, the series has some great moments, especially the kind of last episode. I was on the edge of my seat throughout most of it. Plus, it evidently did intend to possibly continue. I mean, it did end on a cliffhanger, and it did, also with Teddy Sears' character, give hint that FICOR had more plans, that they had a plan B if everything was to fail. So, yeah, it evidently did have some ideas. It didn't necessarily pull them off to the best of its abilities, and should it have ended with Children of Earth? Possibly. But you know what? I'm glad I saw Miracle Day, and you know what? I'm taking it for what it is. It was a fun addition to the Hooniverse. It may never entirely be solved, but you know what? I enjoyed Miracle Day. So I advise you to take a look for yourself, decide whether you like it, whether you dislike it. Let me know. I personally found Torchwood Miracle Day to be not as good as the previous series, but still okay. Anyway, until my next two review, see ya.